this is Jon Bowzer Bauman. You probably know me best as Bowzer from Sha Na Na, but I'm here talking to you today as president of Security Works PAC and an expert on senior issues. And I'm here to tell you at the biggest Democratic club in all of Florida that on the night of November 3rd, 2020, Democrats all over Florida and all over the country have got to be doing this. Can you believe that I have been making a living now for over 50 years doing this? God bless America. And yes, you know, I love the music of the 50s and the 60s, but that does not mean that I actually want to return to the 50s and the 60s, because the 50s and the early 60s were a time before Medicare. And in a time before Medicare, over 35% of American seniors had incomes below the poverty line. And I certainly don't want to return to a time before Social Security was passed in 1935, when, think about this, more than 50%, more than 1 out of every 2 American seniors had incomes below the poverty line. The fact is that Social Security and Medicare are the 2 most successful domestic programs in the entire history of the United States of America, and we need to keep them that way. In fact, we need to expand them. So that is why I've taken on this responsibility for no pay of being president of Social Security Works PAC. In 2018, you should know, I traveled from Alaska to South Florida and from northern Maine to Southern California, doing endorsement events with 57 different candidates, most of them in the House, because it was imperative for us to flip the House in 2018, and we did. And, you know, we were in a search for candidates who were going to be good on senior issues. At Social Security Works PAC, we only got 5 questions on our endorsement questionnaire, so I can run them by you real quick. They are: will you protect and expand Social Security? Will you support protecting and expanding Medicare? Will you support Medicaid expansion as defined in the Affordable Care Act, something that Florida doesn't bother to have, shafting its own citizens? Will you fight to lower drug prices? And the 5th question, will you always refer to Social Security and Medicare as earned benefits and never use the pejorative term entitlements? So every candidate that we endorse at Social Security Works PAC signed on to all 5 of those questions, and then we have the ability to hold them accountable for the votes that they take. So, you know, it's a system that in the end result works out pretty well, but 2018, very important to take the House. 2020 is about the White House and the Senate. So let's go to the White House, because there's nothing more important than winning back the White House, and I know we're all on the same page about this. Understand, I'm sure you know this by now, there is no more important state in the mission to win back the White House than Florida. There are only 6 states that are really going to be most likely in play in this presidential election: Pennsylvania, Michigan, and hopefully we'll win those and take those back. If we do, we need to win 1 out of the following 4. Florida, Arizona, Wisconsin, and North Carolina are the other 3. But it's a very simple message. We win Florida, we win. We win seniors in Florida, we win. So we got to make sure that everybody gets out, everybody gets their ballot, everybody does what they need to do, because nothing could be more obvious than that the current occupant of the White House, who claimed that he was going to be a different kind of Republican and was going to not cut Social Security and Medicare, but there are billions and billions of dollars of cuts in the budget that was presented by this administration. We know he's a con artist anyway, so it's just a great big con. You know, fortunately, because of the House, that budget will never get passed, but we know that there is going to be real danger, and he's even spoken it out loud, that in the second term they would go after those programs that they call entitlements and we call earned benefits. So all that I pretty much have to say about the current occupant of the White House is that he reminds me of a phrase that I speech sang in the 1978 movie Grease, which probably most of you have seen. Every day there's a new version of this coming from there, and in the middle of this COVID-19 pandemic, it just gets worse and worse and worse, if such a thing is possible. It reminds me of the phrase that I spoke during the dance contest. When Cha-Cha Di Gregorio and Danny Zuko were winning the dance contest, and I was singing the song Born to Handjive, and I was summing up the Donald Trump presidency by saying, how low can you go? Say it with me. How low can you go? How low can you go, Donald Trump? How low can you go? Because every day it really does seem, and it's no joke, that there is a new low. Now, I also want to share with you the personal reason why I am so involved in protecting and expanding Social Security and Medicare and all the other senior programs that we've already discussed. Because, there usually is a personal reason when somebody, runs around from Alaska to South Florida and northern Maine to Southern California. And it took me a while to even realize what the personal reason was. But I'm going to share it with you. Some of you already know this, but some of you probably don't. Even though I'm known for what's called the classical music of rock and roll, I actually started out in real classical music. So I have the piano here. Take a look. Let me tilt myself down a little bit so you can actually see the piano. Okay, it's to the detriment of my head being cut off, just like it was in the Grease movie, by the way. You can look for that. But here you can see that I'm really playing. And yes, I started playing piano when I was 7 years old. I attended the Juilliard School of Music in the city of New York, beginning at age 12. Now, there's a little story that goes along with this. If you're a little kid and you're learning how to play classical music, especially in New York City, where do you want to grow up one day to perform? Say it out loud. That's right, a Zoom meeting with the village's Democratic Club. No, the correct answer, and I'm sure you said it to yourselves, is Carnegie Hall. So the year, I'm going to be Bowzer now for a second. So the year was 1973. Carnegie Hall, in desperate financial trouble, has turned to rock and roll. And who should be invited to perform at the fabled, the legendary Carnegie Hall but my old group, Sha Na Na. So, there we are, Sha Na Na, on stage at Carnegie Hall. And in the third row of the audience was the only person standing in the entire audience of Carnegie Hall, my mother. Bessie Bauman, the woman who forced me to practice. And she stood proudly in Carnegie Hall while her son sang Rama Lama Ding Dong. And she waved and she shouted, she cried, Jonathan, because that's my real name that only my mother ever called me. Jonathan, you made it! Because it turned out to your mother, whether it was Chopin's Minute Waltz or Rama Lama Ding Dong, Carnegie Hall was Carnegie Hall. And then when the show was over, she went out to the merchandising table and she started signing autographs, Bowzer's mother. So, in her honor, because she did force me to practice, and for that I thank her still today, I'm going to play for you now my mother's favorite melody, the Chopin Etude in E major. So that's the real personal reason why I'm here with you today. My mother was a public school librarian at PS 45 in Brooklyn, New York. She went actually back to work later in life after my dad passed. And what is relevant to this conversation is that I know firsthand that it was her Social Security and that new program, Medicare, that allowed her to live a life of dignity and independence in her later years that was completely unknown to my grandparents. And that's the real reason why I've gotten so involved in senior issues. And, you know, a very interesting thing, yesterday I did an event with the Florida Democratic Party and in preparation for that, I had to kind of review Joe Biden's plans for Social Security. They are really, really good. They are really, really progressive. I mean, we are an advocacy organization, and we're tough on people's proposals. These plans are really progressive, and they are really good, and they are really going to make a big difference in the lives of seniors. There is a really strong proposal to deal with the Social Security cap, which needs to be done. It's unfair. Everybody pays in 6.2% of their wages up to $137,700 a year, and then they stop paying. So that, you know, a Koch brother, for instance, pays 0.0000001% of their wages in. There is expanding Social Security for seniors. There's expanding survivors benefits. And there is, and it's the first time I've ever brought this up in this context because it's kind of new to me. There is a plan in the Biden proposal to deal with what's called wet GPO, which is a way that if any of you are school teachers or other kinds of public employees, there was something that was put in 1983 that actually is entirely unfair to public employees, positing that they can't really get their Social Security as was promised to them because they have these other income streams. There's a proposal in the Biden plan to do away with wet GPO entirely. So this is all really good stuff, and you know, thrilled to see it. If there were people among you who are like super progressive, you know, or may have even voted for Bernie, this stuff is as good as Bernie stuff. So, you know, we have a really good nominee for this cycle on senior issues. And I don't know if any of you have seen this, but as a result of a bunch of things, including this administration indicating to seniors that it doesn't really care whether they live or die, we can be sacrificed to the economy. We are running ahead in every poll in seniors for the first time in a long time. Hillary Clinton struggled with seniors and lost 53 to 45. We are always voters. We always show up. So we are critically important, but we don't always vote right, as you people in the villages know better than anybody. Our population has to be convinced of doing the things that work for it. So we have a great nominee for ourselves. We need to win the most important state in the country. The other thing I really want to emphasize to you is to get in the mindset. This is going to be a lot different now from winning local elections, which are hard where you are, all the way up to congressional elections, which are hard where you are. Those are uphill battles. But in a presidential election, remind yourselves that every single vote in the state of Florida counts exactly as the same as every other vote. Every person we can get out in the villages counts the same as, the flood that we're expecting to have in Broward. And every person who may have voted for this lunacy before, but is soft on it now, that we can get to either vote for our nominee, or maybe they'll just decide to stay home and not vote at all. Every one of them counts as much as every vote any place in the entire state. So, after all that, the rest of my message is really simple. It goes like this. Bum 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 dang 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 ding dong ding. Vote for Joe Biden. Because on the night of November 3rd, he's got to be doing this. Any questions?
So if you have a question, raise your hand in the participant box. We'll unmute you. Rick, can you unmute Marcia?
Unmuted Alan.
Alan, go ahead.
Okay. Hey, John.
Hi, Alan.
One of the concerns I think that everybody has is the ongoing threat by Trump and his administration to cut the payroll taxes, which apparently, as we know, is pretty much the lifeblood, or one of the lifebloods of Social Security. If he is able to do this, is there anything President Biden can do to undo that?
Oh yeah, well, number one, of course, but number two, we're going to stop him from doing this presumably, because we hold the House. So the real pressure on this, and so far kind of so good on the pushback on payroll taxes, but the real way to thwart this ever happening is through Nancy Pelosi. They need agreement by the House of Representatives to do something about with the payroll tax. As you can well imagine, and as I know you know, we at Social Security Works are 1,000% against touching the payroll tax. Payroll tax is the source of Social Security. Again, if everything works out, this is something I may be getting back to you to put pressure, and in fact start now. It's better if you have a Democratic congressperson, so that your constituent can put pressure on your own congressperson to make sure that they do not fall for any kind of payroll tax cut during the pandemic. There are much better ways to finance what needs to be financed because of COVID, and it is plenty of money that needs to be flowing from the federal government. That is true, but any kind of FICA adjustment payroll tax cut is the worst possible idea, because yes, it does threaten Social Security. It will be immediately undone in a Biden administration, and hopefully, by the way, I'm very bullish on this too, that we have a really good chance to take the Senate. And if we get all three chambers, there will be an amazing amount done beginning in 2021. But obviously, first of all, we got to stay alive. And second of all, we've got to get ourselves out of this mess that has been created. The virus is one thing, but the response to the virus is pick a word, pitiful, pathetic. We have been the worst country in the world responding to the virus. And, pretty much people know it. And there in Florida, you know it because you also have a rotten governor who's a Trump acolyte. I'm in California right now. We've done really pretty well. But, it's still a struggle.
Marcia.
Well, actually, I'd like to wait till the end. I was just hoping that Jon, you would sing us out with the intro to Blue Moon again, but only when you leave us.
I got something even better for you, Marcia.
Okay.
I have something better for you than that because most people don't really know bump 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 bump. It's an acquired, it's a learned phrase. But I got something even better for you because you're going to be able to sing along.
Thank you.
Anybody else have a question? You go down to your participant box and raise your hand. Shirley has a question, Rick.
Right. So hi, Jon. How are you?
Hi, Shirley.
How do we get people to be thinking about Medicare and Social Security when we're so engrossed in COVID? And I worry about that. Some of these things people will try to do underhanded things while we're distracted by staying alive.
Well, again, I really I really am thankful every day for what happened in 2018, because if we had not gotten the House, we would be in really desperate trouble. The House really is the firewall for a lot of horrible things that would have happened without us holding the House. But I really do have pretty good confidence that this House of Representatives, which we have, pretty sizable majority, is going to firewall most horrible things that are going to happen. And look at, here's a perfect example that we talked about on the party call yesterday. I'm heavily involved in the fight to lower drug prices. There's nothing more ridiculous than Medicare not being able to negotiate with drug companies. But, because the Republican Party is entirely in the pockets of big pharma, never going to happen. We're never going to improve this at this time. But the Biden plan is terrific, and the House of Representatives has already passed H.R. 3, which is terrific. If you look at H.R. 3, you're looking at not only will Medicare be able to negotiate with drug companies, but generics will be able to come online immediately, not instead of having to wait until the end of the patent period. And on top of everything else, the advantage of Medicare negotiating with drug companies is going to be passed on to the entire population whereby there's a formula whereby the most that can be charged has to do with the average of 6 other countries, all of which, we're the worst in the world once again. It does make me laugh sort of when, the promise that Trump said we were going to be so tired of winning. I am a little tired of winning because we are number 1 in COVID cases. We're number 1 in COVID deaths. We're number 1 in a lot of things right now. Yes, we're all tired of being number 1 in the things for which we're number 1. But I agree with you that people are distracted, obviously, by COVID. But the way in which all these things interrelate is not escaping anyone, and particularly seniors. Yes, it's escaping some people on the other side of this equation who are completely delusional, but rational people, it's not escaping any of us. And, another good example, everything that's going to happen with regard to COVID drugs, when there are some, relates to everything else that happens to prescription drugs. Drug companies are going to try to gouge people for them, and we're going to have to stop them. They're going to have to be made available to everybody. whether you can, afford the ridiculous prices that they're able to set right now or not. So the things all interrelate, and I really do feel like it's going to come out okay in the wash, because we have at least some leverage to fight it with, and the hue and cry is going to be so astronomical. And this is with regard to anything that happens between now and November, which is really now and next January. The first imperative is to win the election.
Okay, so I have a question now. Back in the 70s, it was Grease for Peace.
Still Grease for Peace.
Is it Grease for seniors now?
It's still Grease for Peace.
It's still Grease for
Peace for everybody.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for coming in and doing this with us. I know it's a little weird to do it online, but you've been probably one of the best speakers that we've had online or off. I've really enjoyed this. You wanted to play us off?
It does kind of work.
I'm sorry?
It does kind of work.
It does kind of work. You wanted to play us off with something special.
Are we ready for the closing song then, Chris?
Let's go ahead.
Okay. Let me see if I can get this balance right. Now, most of you have heard this song at the end of the Sha Na Na television show. Also was originally done by the Spaniards. But we're going to change the words a little bit today to go along with our meeting. You'll know the words. It'll be easy to catch on. Probably the phrase, "Don't hate to leave you, but we really must say," is the only thing I got to impart to you before we start. Because this is the real message for 2020. Good night, Donald Trump. Well, it's time to go. Good night, Donald Trump. Well, it's time to go. Don't hate to leave you, but we really must say, sing along. Good night, Donald Trump. Good night. Good night, Donald Trump. Good night. Good night, Donald Trump. Vote for Joe Biden.
Yay.
Thanks, John. Next time you come to Florida, you know where to come first.